Hi there, and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we'll be learning about quadratic equations, okay? And under quadratic equations, we'll be learning the factorization method. It's a very simple method, very simple principle. There really isn't much to it, and we're going to find out shortly. Now, at this point, I'd remind you to set the video to play in 1080p HD. Very important that you do so, and you can do so via the settings icon on the bottom right. And as the lesson progresses, if you have any issues at all, anything comes of as unclear, please feel free to get in touch. Okay, you can do so via the course dashboard. So let's jump right into the lesson. So quadratic equations, the factorization method. Now, what are quadratic equations? Now, to understand quadratic equations, we need to know what quadratic expressions are. Okay, now a quadratic expression is an algebraic expression with the form ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are constants, i.e. numbers, okay, coefficients, but apart from c, basically. But then you can have a quadratic expression of the form x squared plus 3x minus 4, and in this case we have that a is 1, b, the coefficient of x is 3, and we have our final constant as minus 4. You could also have x squared minus 7x plus 11, and in this case a is 1, b is minus 7, and you have c as 11. Now when a quadratic expression is equated to a constant, it becomes a quadratic equation. For example, you could have x squared plus 3x minus 4 equated to 7. This is a quadratic equation. You could also have x squared minus 7x plus 11 equated to 2. This is another quadratic equation. Now, a quadratic equation is solvable when it is equated to 0. So if you're going to solve a quadratic equation, you need to see that it is equated to 0. So if you're given a quadratic equation, x squared plus 3x minus 4 equals 7, you can move 7 on the right because you need to have that as 0. You can move the 7 over to the left. It becomes minus 7, and what you have is x squared plus 3x minus 11 equals 0. Now this is the solvable quadratic equation. Similarly, if you have x squared minus 7x plus 11 equals 2, and you want to solve this equation, you'd have to move 2 over to the left, and it will become minus 2. And then you have that x squared minus 7x plus 9 equals 0. This is a solvable quadratic equation. Now there are three main methods for solving quadratic equations, and these are the factorization method, the completing the square method, and the formula method. Okay, and in this lesson we'll be learning about the factorization method. Okay, a very simple method. The factorization method is my favorite method, the factorization method. And let's learn about it now. What is the factorization method about? Now I want you to pay very close attention. Okay, very important that you understand what I'm about to do. Okay, so paying close attention. Now watch this. So consider the expansion of the algebraic expression. We have x minus 3 multiplying x minus 4. Very simple. I believe everyone should be somewhat conversant with these. Very simple expression. So you have x minus 3 multiplying x minus 4. And basically to do this, we have x multiplying x minus 4, and then minus 3 multiplying x minus 4. Okay, we have x minus 3 multiplying x minus 4. We take the first x, and we multiply that by x minus 4, and then we take minus 3 and we multiply by x minus 4. And when you solve this out, what you have is x times x, it gives you x squared, minus 4x, minus 3 times x gives you minus 3x, and minus 3 times minus 4 gives you 12. Okay, so you have x squared minus 4x minus 3x plus 12. I believe we can solve the like terms in the middle there, and what we have is we have x squared minus 7x plus 12. Now consider the quadratic equation x squared minus 7x plus 12 equals 0. Okay, so let's say you're given this quadratic equation and you ask to solve it. Now, how would you go about solving this quadratic equation? Now, from what we did in the first step, we identified that x squared minus 7x plus 12 equals 0 is the same as x minus 3 multiplying x minus 4. Okay, just from the expansion we did there, because we know that when you expand x minus 3 and multiplying x minus 4, you end up with x squared minus 7x plus 12. So we can write that x squared minus 7x plus 12 is the same as x minus 3 multiplying x minus 4. Now, here's something else to consider. Now, if you have 2 times 0, this gives you 0. Okay? If you have 0 times 2, this gives you 0 as well. Now, something you'd notice or something you'd identify is the only way you arrive at a solution 0 when you multiply two numbers is if one of them is 0. You can never multiply two non-zero numbers to give you 0. You can never multiply 5 and 7 and it give you 0, or 5 and anything apart from 0 to give you 0. The only way you multiply two numbers to give you 0 is if one of the numbers is 0. So if we apply this to what we have here, x minus 3 multiplying x minus 4 equals 0. So x minus 3 on one side multiplying x minus 4 on the other side gives you 0. What does this mean? I think this would suggest that either x minus 3 equals 0 or x minus 4 equals 0. And when we have x minus 3 equals 0, we can go ahead and solve this. We have x minus 3 equals 0, x equals, we move minus 3 over to the right, x equals 3. You have x minus 4 equals 0, and you have x equals 4. And there we have it. We've actually solved this quadratic equation. And all we did was identify that x squared minus 7x plus 12 is the same as x minus 3 multiplying x minus 4. Okay, so if you're given the quadratic equation x squared minus 7x plus 12 equals 0, the one thing you need to do is you need to know that x minus 3 multiplying x minus 4 is the same as x squared minus 7x plus 12. And once you equate that to 0, it's pretty much straightforward from there. You simply go 1 must be equal to 0, you equate that one to 0, you solve, and you equate the second one to 0, and you solve as well. But then when you ask to solve quadratic equations using the factorization method, you would not be given these numbers, these expressions in the brackets. You wouldn't be told what expressions are equal to the quadratic expression in the bracket. For example, in this case, we're given x squared minus 7x plus 12 equals 0, and in a way, we got a hint that this is the same as x minus 3, x minus 4 equals 0. So what we're going to learn now is how to get from that point, x squared minus 7x plus 12 equals 0, to x minus 3 multiplying x minus 4 equals 0. Because after that, it's fairly simple from there. And we're going to find that out now. So we'll do so using an example, okay? And our example says, using the factorization method, solve the quadratic equation x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. Okay, now our aim here is to get two expressions in brackets. So we have x plus something or x minus something multiplying x plus something equals 0. Okay, and how do we go about doing this? Now, the first thing we want to do here is we want to multiply the first term and the last term. Okay, so in this case, we have x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. We want to multiply the first term x squared and the last term minus 6. Okay, and when we do that, we have minus 6x squared. Okay. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to find two terms that we would multiply to give us what our result from the first step, okay, minus 6x squared. And when we add them, we'll get our middle term minus x, okay. So in the first step, we worked with the first term and the last term. Now we're considering the middle term. So what we want to do now is we want to find two terms that when we add them, we'll get the middle term minus x, okay, and when we multiply them, we'll get minus 6x squared. And as you can see on the screen, those two terms are minus 3x and 2x, because if you add them up, minus 3x plus 2x is minus x, okay, and if you multiply them, minus 3x times 2x equals minus 6x squared, our result from step 1. So what do we do next? Now the next thing we want to do is we have our quadratic equation as x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. What we're going to do, because we know that minus 3x plus 2x is minus x or equals minus x, we're going to substitute minus x for minus 3x plus 2x in the equation. Simply this, okay. So because we know that minus 3x plus 2x is minus x, we'll put in minus 3x plus 2x for minus x in the equation. So just replace minus x with minus 3x plus 2x, and what you have is you have this, okay. Now the next thing we want to do is we have that expression. Now we're going to group them in twos, okay. We have four terms, we're going to group them in twos, and what we have is we have x squared minus 3x plus 2x minus 6 equals 0, okay. So we just introduce some brackets and we have them grouped, okay. Now what we want to do is we want to factorize each group, okay. So we factorize the first one. We have x squared minus 3x, and I can factorize this using x. So I say x, and that will give me x multiplying x minus 3, okay. And for the second group, we have 2x minus 6, and I can factorize this using 2, and I have 2 multiplying x minus 3. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to factorize using x minus 3, okay. And when I factorize using x minus 3, I have x from the first group there. If you divide that by x minus 3, you have x, and then when you divide the second one by x minus 3, you have 2. So you have x minus 3 multiplied x plus 2 equals 0. And from this point, I think everybody's familiar with this because we've done exactly what we aim to achieve. So we have x minus 3 multiplying x plus 2 equals 0. We can go ahead and say x plus 2 equals 0, x equals minus 2, okay, and x minus 3 equals 0, x equals 3. And that is how you solve a quadratic equation using the factorization method. Okay, so the first thing you do is you multiply the first and last term. The second thing you do is you find two terms that you would add to give the middle term, and when you multiply them, it gives you the result from step 1. Okay, step 3 says substitute those terms for the middle term in the equation, and once you have that, you simply group them in 2, and then you factorize linearly till you get to the point where x minus 3 multiplying x plus 2 equals 0. And from that point on, very simple, we have that x equals minus 2, x equals 3. And that is how you solve a quadratic equation using the factorization method. Let's go ahead and do another example. So example 2. Example 2 says using the factorization method, solve the quadratic equation 2x squared minus 7x plus 3 equals 0. Okay, so first thing I want to do is I want to multiply the first and last term, okay, and when I do that, I have 6x squared. The next thing I want to do is I want to find two terms that I would multiply to give me my answer from step 1, and when I add them up, I get my result from step 2. I get the middle term, sorry. So we have the result from step 1 and the middle term. So you have 6x plus x, those are my terms. 6x plus x gives you the middle term, 7x, okay? And you have 6x multiplied by x gives you the answer, the result from step 1 as 6x squared. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to substitute 6x plus x for 7x in our equation. And what we have is 2x squared plus 6x plus x plus 3 equals 0. Now, what do we do next? Now we want to group them. Okay, so when we group them, and then we'll go ahead and factorize. All right, and when you factorize, you have 2x multiplying x plus 3 plus 1. You always factorize. Sometimes there isn't a need to factorize. You can have it just as x plus 3, but then you factorize using 1. Okay, which pretty much keeps it the same, but yeah, you always factorize at this point. Okay, so if it really isn't a need to factorize, you just factorize using 1. Okay, and what we end up with is we have 2x plus 1 multiplying x plus 3 equals 0. And from that point on, you go ahead and say 2x plus 1 equals 0, x equals minus 1 over 2, x plus 3 equals 0, x equals minus 3. And that would bring us to the end of this lesson. A very interesting lesson, to be honest. Like I said, the factorization method is my favorite method for solving quadratic equation. And yeah, bye for now.